My brother always mocked my grease-stained hands, but when his tech empire collapsed, my parents demanded I sell my auto shop to save him. They thought they could bully me into submission, so I prepared a special, financial aid package that would teach them the true value of hard work. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The room was spinning, a slow, nauseating rotation that matched the churning in my stomach. I was curled up on the worn leather sofa in the living room mic, and I had renovated ourselves, wrapped in 3 layers of blankets despite the thermostat reading a comfortable 72 degrees. The flu had hit me like a freight train, specifically a runaway freight train carrying a load of scrap metal. My joints ached with a deep, throbbing resonance that I usually only felt after a 16-hour shift under a lifted truck suspension. I had taken the day off from the garage, a rarity for me. Redline Auto Repair didn't just run itself, even with a solid crew. But today, my body had staged a mutiny. My husband, Mike, had left for his welding job at dawn, leaving a thermos of chicken broth and a strict instruction to stay horizontal. I was trying to obey him, drifting in and out of a feverish sleep, when the phone on the coffee table began to buzz. It wasn't a polite ring. It was an angry, persistent vibration against the hardwood surface. I groaned, pulling a hand out from the cocoon of blankets to blindly slap at the device. I squinted at the screen. "Mom." A knot of anxiety tightened in my chest, separate from the illness. My mother, Linda, didn't call to chat. She didn't call to swap recipes or ask how the business was doing. She called when she needed something or when she wanted to critique something. I cleared my throat, trying to sound less like a dying frog. "Hello." "Casey, pick up, I know you're there." Her voice was sharp, piercing through the fog in my brain. She didn't say hello, she never did. "I did pick up, Mom," I rasped, wincing as the sound of my own voice scraped my raw throat. "I'm sick. I've got the flu. I'm trying to sleep." There was a pause on the other end, but not the kind of pause that indicated concern. It was the pause of someone annoyed that an obstacle had been placed in their path. "Well, you need to wake up," she snapped. "We have an emergency, a family emergency. You need to come to the house immediately." I closed my eyes, pressing the phone against my ear. "Mom, I'm running 102 fever. I can't drive. I can barely stand up. Whatever it is, can it wait until?" "It cannot wait." Her voice rose an octave, cracking with a hysteria I hadn't heard since the time the caterer got the wrong shade of napkins for her anniversary party. "This is about Derek. It's catastrophic, Casey. He's here. Your father is pacing a hole in the floor. We need the family together. Now." Derek, of course. My older brother, the golden child, the visionary, the genius who was too good for manual labor, too brilliant for a 9-to-5. If there was a crisis involving Derek, the world stopped turning. "Is he hurt?" I asked, sitting up slowly, the room tilting dangerously. "Is he in the hospital?" "He might as well be," she sobbed, the anger suddenly replaced by a dramatic wail. "They're going to ruin him, Casey. They're going to take everything. You have to come. We need to discuss assets. We need to discuss the plan." "Assets," I repeated, confusion cutting through the fever. "What are you talking about?" "Just get here," she screamed, and then the line went dead. I sat there for a moment, the silence of the house pressing in on me. My head was pounding, a rhythmic thudding behind my eyes. I knew, logically, that I should call Mike. I should tell him not to worry, that I was just going back to sleep. But the terror in my mother's voice, despite her usual dramatics, had been real. And the mention of assets sent a cold chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the flu. I dragged myself off the couch. My legs felt like lead pipes. I shuffled to the bathroom, splashing cold water on my burning face. I looked at myself in the mirror, pale, dark circles under my eyes, hair a matted mess. I looked like a wreck. 30 minutes, I whispered to my reflection. "I'll give them 30 minutes. I threw on a hoodie over my pajamas, grabbed my keys, and stumbled out the door. The drive to my parents' house was a blur of gray pavement and motion sickness. I kept the windows down, letting the biting autumn air keep me conscious. When I pulled into their driveway, the contrast was immediate. My truck, a reliable but battered heavy-duty pickup with my shop's logo, a piston and gear in red and black, stenciled on the door, looked like an alien in va. There next to the pristine landscaping of my parents' suburban fortress. And there, parked right in the center of the driveway, was Derek's car. A sleek, matte black luxury sports sedan that cost more than my first 3 years of overhead combined. I parked on the street, not wanting to leak oil on their precious pavers. Walking up the path, I felt a sense of dread heavier than the sickness. I reached for the door handle, my hand trembling slightly. I didn't know what was waiting for me on the other side, but as I pushed the door open and heard my father's booming voice shouting about lawyers and liquidation, I knew one thing for certain. The betrayal I was about to walk into was going to hurt far worse than the virus raging in my blood. The interior of my parents' house always smelled like lemon polish and judgment. Today, however, the underlying scent was panic. I stepped into the foyer, shivering as the door closed behind me. The house was impeccably staged, as always: white carpets, glass tables, abstract art that cost a fortune but meant nothing. It was a museum to their ego, a stark contrast to the warm, cluttered, oil-smelling office I practically lived in at the garage. "She's here," my mother announced. She was standing by the entrance to the living room, wringing her hands. She was dressed in a silk blouse and slacks, hair perfectly coiffed, but her makeup was smudged around the eyes. My father, Robert, stopped pacing in front of the fireplace. He looked older than I remembered, his face flushed a dangerous shade of red. "It's about time, Casey. We've been waiting." "I told you I'm sick," I said, my voice rough. I leaned against the doorframe for support, refusing to step fully onto the white carpet in my work boots, even though I knew they were clean. It was a habit ingrained from childhood: don't dirty the shrine. "Where's Derek?" "He's in the study," Mom said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He can't face us right now. He's devastated." "Okay," I said, fighting the urge to close my heavy eyes. "So, what is the emergency? Is he sick? Is he in trouble with the law?" "It's his company," Dad said, spitting the words out like they tasted like bile. "Visionary tech. The market, the investors, they pulled the rug out from under him. It's a conspiracy, Casey. They want to steal his genius." I suppressed a cough. I knew about Derek's genius. I knew about the startup he'd been bragging about for 2 years, an app that was supposed to disrupt the lifestyle management space, whatever that meant. To me, it sounded like a calendar for rich people who couldn't dress themselves. "So the business failed," I said flatly. "That happens, Dad. It sucks, but it's a risk." "Failed?" Dad looked at me with genuine disgust. "It didn't just fail, Casey. There are debts, personal guarantees. They're coming for his assets. His condo, his car, everything." "Okay," I said again, trying to process this through the fever haze. "So he declares bankruptcy. He starts over. Why am I here?" My mother stepped forward, reaching out to touch my arm. Her hands were ice cold. "Casey, you don't understand. It's not just bankruptcy. There are legal complications. If he doesn't pay back the initial angel investors, people we know, people from the club, he could be facing fraud charges. He needs liquidity, immediate liquidity." My stomach dropped. Fraud. "It was a misunderstanding," Dad roared, slamming his hand on the mantelpiece. "He moved some funds around to keep the lights on. He was trying to save the company, but these vultures, they don't care about intent." "Okay," I said, stepping back. "So he needs a lawyer. I can give you the number of the guy who handles my liability contracts. He's good." My parents exchanged a look. It was a look I knew well. It was the look they used to give each other when they decided which summer camp to send me to so I wouldn't be in the way of Derek's tennis lessons. "We don't need a lawyer's number, Casey," Mom said softly. "We need money, substantial money." I let out a dry, hacking laugh. "Mom, I run a garage. I do okay. but I don't have save a tech CEO from fraud charges money sitting in my checking account. You know that. We know you don't have the cash, Dad said, his eyes locking onto mine. But you have the property. The room went silent. The air conditioning hummed, loud and oppressive. The property, I whispered. The garage, Dad said, his tone shifting from angry to authoritative. The land on 4th Street, it's prime real estate now. The developers have been sniffing around that block for months. We did the math. If you sell the lot and the building, it would cover Derek's immediate debts and leave enough for legal fees. I stared at them. I actually stopped breathing for a moment. You want me to sell my business? I asked, my voice trembling. You want me to sell Redline? It's just a garage, Casey, Mom said pleadingly. It's dirty, it's loud, you're always exhausted. Honestly, it's below you. This is a chance for you to get out of that life and help your brother. It's the right thing to do. It's my life, I said, the shock turning into a cold, hard rage that cut through the fever. I built that place from the ground up. I bought that land when it was a junkyard. I cleared the rusted metal with my own hands. I employ 6 people. Mike and I rely on that income. Mike can get a job anywhere, Dad scoffed. He's a welder. And you can manage things for Derek once he gets back on his feet. He'll need an assistant. An assistant? They wanted me to burn down my empire. The one I built with sweat, blood, and busted knuckles, so I could be a secretary for the brother who called me a grease monkey at my own wedding. No, I said. Casey, be reasonable, Mom cried, tears streaming down her face again. He's your brother. He's family. You can't just let him go to prison because you're attached to a repair shop. It's not a repair shop, it's a high-performance automotive center, I corrected, my voice gaining strength. And the answer is no. I am not selling my livelihood to fix Derek's mistakes. You selfish little, Dad started, taking a step toward me. Don't, I warned, holding up a hand. I'm leaving. I'm going home to throw up, and then I'm going back to work on Monday. I turned to the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. If you walk out that door, Dad shouted, don't expect us to be there for you when you fail. Because you will fail, Casey. You're just a mechanic. You don't have the head for business. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. I looked back at them, my parents, standing in their flawless, mortgaged home, demanding I sacrifice my solvency for their vanity. I don't expect anything from you, I said quietly. I never have. As I walked out into the cold air, my mind was racing. They thought I was just a stubborn mechanic. They thought the garage was just a lot to be sold. They thought they could pressure me because they assumed I was simple, that I didn't understand finance or leverage. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. I didn't just fix cars. I diagnosed broken systems for a living. And while they were screaming about selling my land, they had no idea that I had already run a background check on visionary tech 3 months ago when Derek tried to get me to invest. I knew things about his misunderstanding that even they didn't know yet. I didn't sleep that night. The fever broke around 3:00 a.m., leaving me shivering in a pool of sweat, but my mind was running at redline RPMs. I lay in the dark, listening to Mike's steady breathing beside me. I thought about the last 10 years. While Derek was finding himself in Europe on Dad's dime, I was working double shifts at a chain lube shop, saving every penny. While Derek was getting his MBA and throwing parties that cost more than my truck, I was buying a derelict lot on the edge of town that everyone said was a waste of money. I remembered the nights I slept in the office chair because I couldn't afford the gas to drive home. I remembered the chemical burns, the sliced fingers, the back spasms. I remembered the day I finally paid off the small business loan 3 years early. And I remembered my wedding. It was a backyard barbecue. We couldn't afford a venue because every spare dollar was going into the new hydraulic lifts for the shop. I wore a simple white sundress. Mike wore a nice button-down and clean jeans. We had a local band play, and we served brisket and beer. It was perfect. Until Derek made his toast. To Casey and Mike, he had said, swaying slightly with a glass of champagne he'd brought himself because he refused to drink domestic swill. It's so brave of you two to embrace the simple life. I mean, really. No pomp, no circumstance, just meat and mud. It suits you. Here's to hoping you can keep the lights on. The guests had laughed nervously. My parents had beamed, thinking he was being charming. I had just gripped Mike's hand under the table until my knuckles turned white. Now, 3 years later, the script had flipped, but they still expected me to play the supporting role. The next morning, I felt weak but functional. I made coffee, kissed Mike goodbye, and told him I had some admin work to handle. I didn't tell him about the ultimatum yet. He had a short fuse when it came to my family, and I needed to handle this surgically. Around 10:00 a.m., the doorbell rang. I checked the security camera feed on my phone. It was Derek. He didn't look like a man facing prison. He was wearing a tailored navy suit, a crisp white shirt with the top button undone, and loafers that probably cost $600. He was leaning against the doorframe, checking his watch, a heavy gold chronometer that glinted in the sun. I opened the door. "You've got 5 minutes, Derek, I'm busy." "Casey," he smiled, a SM. Ooth practiced expression that didn't reach his eyes. "You look rough. Mom said you were under the weather." "Flu," I said, not moving to let him in. "What do you want?" "Can I come in? It's a bit chilly out here." He pushed past me before I could answer, striding into my living room like he owned it. He looked around, his nose wrinkling slightly at the pile of laundry I hadn't folded yet. "Quaint. Really? You've done a lot with the limited square footage." "Cut the crap, Derek," I said, leaning against the wall, crossing my arms over my chest. "Mom and Dad told me the plan. You want me to sell Redline." He turned to face me, his expression shifting to one of mock sympathy. "Look, Case, I know you're attached to the shop. It's your little project. But we're talking about macroeconomics here. Visionary tech is a unicorn. It's just hit a temporary liquidity snag. If you liquidate the garage, I can bridge the gap, relaunch in Q3, and I'll pay you back double. Think of it as an investment. Finally, you'll be part of something big." "My little project generated 6 figures in profit last year," I said coldly. "And it has 0 debt. How much debt do you have, Derek?" He waved his hand dismissively. "It's complicated corporate structure, you wouldn't understand. The point is, I'm offering you a way out. You can stop breaking your back under those cars. You sell, give me the capital, I hire you as my executive assistant. You'll have health insurance, a desk, air conditioning. You'd be working for a CEO. "I am a CEO," I said, "of my own company." Derek laughed. It was a genuine, bubbling laugh. "Oh, Casey, you're a mechanic, you change oil. Let's be real, you're a low-class mechanic who got lucky with some real estate. Mom and Dad know it, I know it. You're playing shopkeeper, I'm building the future." He stepped closer, invading my personal space. I could smell his cologne, sandalwood, and arrogance. "Here's the reality," he said, his voice dropping. "Mom and Dad are going to write me out of the will if I go down. They can't handle the shame. But if I go down, I'm taking everyone with me. I know they co-signed on your original loan for the land purchase back in the day. I can make things very difficult for them, and for you. I refinanced them off that loan 5 years ago," I said. "They have no liability on my shop." He blinked. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face, but he smoothed it over instantly. "Doesn't matter, the pressure they'll put on you, it'll be relentless. They'll cut you off. No more family dinners, no more holidays. You'll be an orphan. Is your grease pit worth that?" He looked at me, expecting me to fold. He expected the little sister who used to do his homework to crumble. "You're right," I said, keeping my face perfectly neutral. "It is a lot to think about." Derek smiled, the predator sensing weakness. "Exactly. Smart girl. Look, I need an answer by Friday. The creditors are meeting on Monday. Think about it, don't be selfish." He patted my shoulder, a condescending tap-tap, and walked out. I watched him get into his car. I watched him check his hair in the rearview mirror before peeling out. He thought he had won. He thought he had scared me. But as I watched him drive away, I wasn't thinking about selling. I was thinking about the audit report I had in my safe. I was thinking about the forensic accountant client of mine who owed me a favor for fixing his vintage Porsche. Derek wanted liquidity. I was going to give him a flood. I stood in the center of my living room for a long time after Derek's car disappeared down the street. The silence of the house felt heavy, charged with the residue of his threats. Low-class mechanic. The words echoed in my head, bouncing off the walls Mike and I had painted, the furniture we had picked out together. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is a flash in the pan. It burns hot and fast and leaves you with nothing but ash. What I felt now was cold, mechanical precision. It was the same feeling I got when I listened to an engine knock and knew, with absolute certainty, that a rod was about to throw. You don't get angry at the engine. You strip it down, find the fault, and fix it. Or, if it's too far gone, you scrap it. I walked to the kitchen and picked up my phone. I scrolled past my parents' missed calls, 3 of them already, and found the number I needed. Marcus, it's Casey, from Redline. Casey? Marcus's voice was warm, booming. Don't tell me the Porsche's acting up again. It was purring like a kitten last week. The car is fine, Marcus. It's something else. I need a consult, a professional one, and I need it off the books, strictly confidential. The tone on the other end shifted instantly. Marcus was a forensic accountant, a man who spent his days digging through corporate carcasses to find where the money had been buried. I'm listening. I need you to look into a company called Visionary Tech. The CEO is Derek. Vance. There was a pause, the sound of typing in the background. Vance, your brother. Yes, he's in trouble. He's asking for a bailout, a big one. He wants me to liquidate my business to save his. Before I make a move, I need to know what I'm buying. He says it's a liquidity snag. I think it's a blown gasket. Give me 2 hours, Marcus said. I have access to some, let's call them industry databases. If there are liens, lawsuits, or red flags, I'll find them. Meet me at the diner on 5th, the one with the terrible coffee. See you there. I spent the next 2 hours pacing. I couldn't sit still. I went out to the garage, my home garage, not the shop, and started organizing my tools just to keep my hands busy. I wiped down wrenches that were already clean. I reorganized my socket set by millimeter. My mind was racing through every interaction I'd had with Derek over the last 2 years. The vague answers about what his app actually did. The flashy cars that changed every 6 months. The way he always picked up the check at dinner with a corporate card, but never had cash for the valet. When I walked into the diner, Marcus was already there, tucked into a corner booth. He had a thick manila folder in front of him and a cup of black coffee that looked like motor oil. I slid into the booth opposite him. That bad? Marcus didn't smile. He pushed the folder across the Formica table. Casey, this isn't a business, it's a sinkhole. I opened the folder. It was a mess of spreadsheets, court filings, and credit reports. To the untrained eye, it was boring. To me, it looked like a diagnostic report for a car that had been driven off a cliff. Walk me through it, I said, my finger tracing a line of red ink. Okay, first off, Marcus said, leaning in, his voice low. The investors he talks about, they aren't venture capital firms. They're hard money lenders. High interest, short terms, aggressive collection tactics. He borrowed against the company's future valuation, which is imaginary. He said he had angel investors from the club, I murmured. He does, that's the second part. He took money from individuals, friends of your parents, I'm guessing, and he commingled the funds. Casey, he's been using investment capital to pay off the interest on the hard money loans. It's a classic Ponzi structure, whether he realizes it or not. He's paying Peter to pay Paul, but he's skimming 20% off the top for lifestyle expenses. I felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with the flu. Lifestyle expenses. Marcus flipped a page. Leased luxury vehicles. First-class travel to conferences in Ibiza and Dubai that don't exist. A penthouse apartment downtown that the company pays for as office space. He's been living like a king on borrowed dimes. And the debt? I asked, dreading the answer. Total exposure is roughly $4 million, Marcus said flatly. But here's the kicker. He didn't just sign for the company, he signed personal guarantees. And Casey, look at this. He pointed to a document near the back. It was a loan agreement from 6 months ago, a bridge loan for $200,000. Recognize that signature? Marcus asked. I stared at the scrawl at the bottom of the page. It was shaky, loopier than usual, but I knew it. Robert Vance. Dad, I whispered. Your father is listed as a guarantor, Marcus said. But look at the date. Your parents were in Italy for their anniversary that week. I remember because you told me you were house-sitting their dogs. I looked up at Marcus, the blood draining from my face. He forged it. It certainly looks that way, Marcus said gently. If this goes belly up, and it will within weeks, the creditors aren't just coming for Derek. They're coming for your parents. They'll take the house, the retirement accounts, everything. Derek has effectively attached a bomb to your parents' financial life. I sat back, the vinyl of the booth squeaking against my jacket. The sheer scale of it was breathtaking. Derek wasn't just asking me to sell my shop to save his reputation. He was asking me to throw my life's work into a black hole to cover up a crime he had committed against our own father. If I sold the shop, the money would vanish into this debt, and 6 months later they'd be broke again. It wouldn't save them. It would just delay the explosion. Can I keep this? I asked, tapping the folder. It's yours, Marcus said. Casey, be careful. People like this, when they're cornered, they get dangerous. I know, I said, standing up. Thanks, Marcus. I'll send you a check. On the house, he said. Just fix that dent in my bumper when you get a chance. I walked out of the diner, the folder tucked under my arm like a weapon. I wasn't just a mechanic anymore. I was the judge, the jury, and I was about to be the executioner. I waited 2 days. I let them stew. I let them think I was crunching the numbers, talking to realtors, prepare. Ing to be the dutiful daughter. My phone blew up with texts from Mom, alternating between guilt trips. Dad's blood pressure is through the roof, and sweet-talking. We looked at some lovely office spaces for you to work in with Derek. I didn't reply. I was busy. I spent those 2 days at the shop, but I wasn't working on cars. I was in my office, cross-referencing Marcus's report with public records. I built a timeline. I printed emails Derek had forwarded me months ago trying to brag, which now served as evidence of his spending. And I prepared the gift. On Wednesday evening, I finally called them back. I'm coming over, I said. I have an answer. Thank God, Mom cried. We'll order dinner. Derek is here. We can sign the papers tonight. Have everyone at the table, I said. We need to be clear on the terms. When I arrived, the atmosphere was celebratory. Dad was pouring wine. Mom had set the dining table with the good china. Derek was there, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him in months. He was already counting my money in his head. Casey, Derek beamed, standing up to hug me. I sidestepped him, placing my heavy canvas bag on the floor. So glad you came to your senses. Really, sis, it's for the best. You were burning out at that garage anyway. Sit down, Derek, I said calmly, taking my seat at the head of the table, a spot usually reserved for Dad. Dad frowned but didn't argue, too eager to get the deal done. So, have you contacted a realtor? The market is hot, we shouldn't wait. I haven't contacted a realtor, I said, placing the manila folder on the table, because I'm not selling Redline. The silence that followed was absolute. The clinking of silverware stopped. Derek's smile froze, then slowly curdled into a sneer. Excuse me, Dad said, his voice dropping to a growl. We discussed this. It's the only way. It's not the only way, I said. It's the stupidest way. I looked at the numbers, Derek, not the ones you showed Mom and Dad, the real ones. Derek laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. What real ones? You don't have access to my books. You're bluffing. I know about the hard money lenders, I said, opening the folder. I know about the consulting fees paid to a shell company in Nevada that lists your girlfriend as the registered agent. I know that you spent $40,000 on a launch party for a version of the app that hadn't even been coded yet. Mom gasped, looking from me to Derek. Derek, what is she talking about? She's lying, Derek shouted, slamming his fist on the table. She's jealous. She's trying to sabotage me because she can't stand that I'm successful. Successful? I looked at him with pity. Derek, you're insolvent. You're not a CEO. You're a con artist. That is enough. Dad stood up, his face purple. Casey, how dare you come into this house and slander your brother? He is under immense pressure. He needs our support, not your petty investigations. Support? I pulled out the loan document, the one with the forged signature. I hadn't planned to play this card yet, but Dad's blindness forced my hand. Is this support, Dad, or is this theft? I slid the paper toward him. Look at the date. Look at the signature. You were in Tuscany. You didn't sign this. Dad looked down. He squinted at the paper. His hand shook as he reached for his reading glasses. He stared at it for a long time. Dad stammered. He looked at Derek. Derek, what is this? Derek's face went pale, then red. He scrambled for an excuse. It was a formality. You said you'd help me. I just saved us the time of faxing papers back and forth. I was going to pay it off before you even knew. You forged my signature. Dad's voice was barely a whisper. On a $200,000 note. I did it for the company, Derek screamed, standing up and knocking his chair over. I did it for the family legacy. You want me to be a titan of industry, right? Well, this is how it's done. You take risks. Casey wouldn't understand. She plays in the dirt all day. I play in the dirt, I said, my voice cutting through his hysteria. And I pay my own bills, and I don't steal from my parents. You think you're so perfect, Derek spat, pointing a shaking finger at me. You think you're better than me? You're nothing. You're a college dropout who fixes beaters. You're an embarrassment to this family. Maybe, I said, standing up slowly. But I'm the only one at this table with a net positive worth. Get out, Derek hissed. Get out of here. I looked at my parents. Mom was sobbing into her napkin. Dad was staring at Derek like he was seeing a stranger. But even now, I could see the hesitation in Dad's eyes. He was angry, yes, but he was also terrified. He was terrified of the scandal. He was terrified of admitting that his golden child was flawed. He didn't mean it, Robert, Mom whimpered. He was desperate. We can fix this, if Casey just sells the shop. I stared at her. I couldn't believe it. Even with the proof of forgery on the table, she was still trying to sacrifice me to save him. You're kidding, right? I asked. He committed a felony against you, and you still want my money. We can't let him go to jail, Casey, Mom wailed. He's your brother. I'm not selling, I said firmly. Not today, not ever. And if you try to force me, or if you try to guilt me, I'll take this folder to the district attorney myself. You wouldn't, Derek sneered. You don't have the guts. Try me, I said. I picked up my bag. I'm leaving, but Derek, don't think this is over. You have until Friday to come clean to the rest of your investors. Or I start making calls. I walked out, leaving the chaos behind me, but I knew deep down that this wasn't the end. Derek was a cornered rat, and rats don't just surrender, they bite. The next morning, the war came to my doorstep. I arrived at Red Line at 7:00 a.m. to find a city code enforcement truck parked in front of the bay doors. A man with a clipboard was walking around the perimeter of my building, taking photos. Can I help you? I asked, stepping out of my truck. Complaint filed, the inspector said without looking up. Anonymous tip about improper disposal of hazardous fluids and unpermitted structural modifications. I have my permits, I said, unlocking the office door. And my disposal logs are immaculate. Who filed the complaint? Anonymous, he repeated. I need to see your oil separators and your ventilation specs. It took 3 hours. He found nothing, of course. My shop was cleaner than a hospital operating room. But while I was dealing with him, I missed 3 calls from vendors. When I finally checked my messages, I found out why. Casey, it's Jim from Napa. Look, someone called our credit department this morning claiming to be your financial officer. Said Redline is filing for Chapter 11 and to freeze the account. I know it's BS, but corporate locked your line of credit automatically. You need to call them. I slammed the phone down. Derek. He was trying to bleed me. He thought if he could disrupt my business, he could force me into a position where I'd have to sell, or at least where I'd be too distracted to fight him. I called Mike. He's attacking the shop. I'm coming over, Mike said, the sound of a welding torch hissing in the background. No, I said. Stay at work. If he's coming for us, we need every dime. I can handle the vendors. I need you to do something else. Name it. Go to the storage unit. Get the box, the one from your old job site. The gift, Mike asked, his voice grim. The gift, I confirmed. Bring it to the family dinner on Sunday. I have a feeling they're going to try one last intervention. The attacks didn't stop there. By Friday, I had a fake negative review bomb on Google, 21-star reviews in an hour, all from accounts created that day, claiming I had stolen parts from their cars. I had a concerned neighbor call the police about noise violations. But Derek had made a fatal error. He assumed I would panic. He assumed I would crumble under the pressure like he did. Instead, I went on the offensive. I called every single person on the list Marcus had given me. I didn't tell them everything, but I told them enough. I told them that rumors of visionary tech's insolvency were substantiated and that they should demand immediate accounting. Then I found the smoking gun. I was digging through the public records of the shell company Derek was paying consulting fees to. I found the incorporation documents. The handwriting on the application was familiar. It wasn't his girlfriend, S. It was mine. Or rather, a forgery of mine. He had listed me, Casey Vance, as the managing member of the shell company. He was funneling the stolen money into an account under my name, using an old ID he must have swiped from my house years ago. If the feds investigated, it wouldn't just look like Derek was stealing. It would look like we were stealing together. He had set me up as his fall guy. He had built a trapdoor under my feet before he even asked me for money. I sat in my office, staring at the screen, my hands shaking with a rage so pure it felt like clarity. He wasn't just a bad brother. He was a parasite. He had prepared to send me to prison to save his own skin. The phone rang. It was Mom. Casey, she sounded exhausted. Please, just come to dinner on Sunday. Your father he's not doing well. He wants to make peace. Derek is willing to apologize. He wants to make a deal. A deal, I repeated flatly. Yes, he has a proposal. A compromise, please, Casey, for the family. I'll be there, I said, and tell Derek I'm bringing a counter-proposal. I hung up. I looked at the gift sitting on the corner of my desk, which Mike had dropped off earlier. It was wrapped in elegant silver paper with a big blue bow. It looked expensive. It looked like a peace offering. Inside, it was the weapon that would end this war. I wasn't going to save him. I wasn't going to negotiate. I was going to expose him in a way that would make it impossible for my parents to ever look at him the same way again. I picked up the phone and dialed Marcus one last time. It's Casey, you know that DA friend you mentioned, the one who hates white-collar fraud. Yeah. Is he free for a chat on Monday morning? I'm going to have a package for him. You sure about this, Casey? Once you pull that trigger, you can't unpull it. I know, I said, looking at the forged incorporation document on my screen. But he pulled the trigger on me a long time ago. I'm just firing back. Sunday dinner at the Vance household was usually a performance of suburban perfection. But tonight, the air was so thick with tension you could cut it with a reciprocating saw. I pulled up in my truck, Mike following close behind in his sedan. I needed him there, not just for moral support, but as a witness. I carried the silver-wrapped box, handling it with the care of a bomb disposal technician. When we entered, the tableau was set. Mom and Dad were seated on the living room sofa, looking like they had aged 10 years in a week. Derek was standing by the fireplace, a tumbler of scotch in his hand. He looked ragged, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, the tailored suit replaced by a wrinkled polo shirt and jeans, but the arrogance was still there, simmering under the surface. "You came," Dad said, his voice hoarse. He didn't get up. "I said I would," I replied, placing the box on the coffee table. It landed with a heavy thud. "What's that?" Derek asked, eyeing the box suspiciously. "A bomb." "A gift," I said, "but we'll get to that." Let's just talk," Mom said, her voice trembling. "Derek has explained everything to us, Casey. He's explained about the signature. It was a misunderstanding. He was trying to protect us from the stress of the financial details." I looked at her, astounded by the depth of her denial. "He forged Dad's name on a $200,000 loan, Mom. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a crime." "It's family business," Dad snapped, though his eyes wouldn't meet mine. "We handle it internally. Derek has a plan. He's found a buyer for the company's IP, a Chinese firm. They're offering enough to clear the immediate debts. But the deal takes 60 days to close. We need a bridge, just 60 days. "So we're back to selling my shop," I said, crossing my arms. "Not selling," Derek interjected, stepping forward. He tried to put on his charming CEO mask, but it slipped. "Collateralizing. You put the deed up as security for a short-term high-interest loan. I get the cash, pay off the aggressive lenders, the deal closes in 2 months, I pay off your loan, and you keep the shop. Zero risk." "Zero risk," I repeated. "Except for the part where your deal is imaginary, Derek." "It's real," he shouted. "I have the letter of intent." "Let me guess," I said. "Is the letter from a company called Apex Solutions?" Derek froze. His glass rattled against his teeth as he took a sip. How did you know that?" "Because I looked them up," I said, stepping closer to the coffee table. "Apex Solutions isn't a Chinese firm. It's a shell company registered in Delaware 3 days ago. By you." "That's a lie," Derek screamed. "Is it?" I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the folded document, the one showing he had used my identity to set up his previous shell company. "Just like it's a lie that I'm the owner of Vance Consulting Group, the company you've been funneling money into, the one you used my social security number to create." Mom and Dad went dead silent. They looked at the paper I threw on the table next to the gift box. Dad picked it up. His hands were shaking so hard the paper vibrated. "Casey," Dad whispered, "what is this?" "That," I said, pointing at Derek, "is your son setting me up to take the fall for his embezzlement. He wasn't just going to take my shop, Dad. He was going to let me go to prison for his fraud." Derek lunged. It happened fast. He threw the glass of scotch at me, the amber liquid splashing across my chest, and scrambled for the paper in Dad's hand. "Give me that," he shrieked. But Mike was faster. He stepped in, catching Derek by the shoulder and shoving him back. Derek stumbled, hitting the mantelpiece hard. "Don't touch her," Mike said, his voice low and dangerous. "It's fake," Derek yelled, panting. "She forged it. She's trying to frame me." "Stop it," Dad roared. He stood up, the paper crunched in his fist. "Just stop it. Derek, is this true? Did you use your sister's name?" Derek looked at Dad, then at Mom. He saw the horror in their eyes. He saw the illusion crumbling. And then, he did what narcissists always do when cornered. He blamed the victim. "I had to," he cried, tears streaming down his back. Tears of rage, not remorse. "I had to protect the assets. If I put it in my name, they'd seize it. Casey has nothing to lose. She's just a mechanic. Who cares if she has a mark on her record? I have a career. I have a reputation." The silence that followed was deafening. "Just a mechanic," I said softly. I reached down and untied the blue bow on the silver box. "You've always looked down on me, Derek. You mocked my wedding. You mocked my job. You called me low class. But the truth is, my low class job is the only honest thing in this room." I opened the lid. Inside lay a crisp, gray mechanic's jumpsuit. Embroidered on the chest was the Redline Auto Repair logo. Next to it lay a standard employment contract for an entry-level lube technician position. "This is my counteroffer," I said. Derek stared at the jumpsuit like it was contaminated with plague. "What is this?" "You need money," I said. "I'm hiring. Starting pay is $18 an hour. You'll sweep floors, change oil, and clean the bathrooms. You work 40 hours a week. Every Friday, I'll write you a check. You can use that check to pay your lawyers." "You expect me to work for you," Derek spat, "in a garage." "It's the only offer on the table," I said, "because I'm not selling the shop, and I'm not giving you a dime, but I believe in family, so I'm offering you a job, an honest one." "I'd rather rot in jail," Derek hissed. "Good," I said, "because that's the alternative." I looked at my parents. Dad was slumped on the sofa, his head in his hands. Mom was staring at Derek, her mouth open, as if seeing him for the first time. "Dad," I said, "you have a choice. You can keep enabling him and lose your house when the feds come, or you can walk away." Dad looked up. He looked at the forged loan document. He looked at the shell company papers. He looked at his son, who was standing there with a look of pure entitlement, waiting for them to fix it. Dad stood up. He walked over to the fireplace and looked at Derek. "Get out," Dad said. "What?" Derek blinked. "Get out of my house," Dad said, his voice breaking. "You stole from me. You tried to frame your sister. You are not the son I raised. Get out." "Mom," Derek turned to her, desperate. Mom looked at me. She looked at the jumpsuit in the box. She stood up, walked over to me, and took my hand. It was the first time she had held my hand like that since I was a child. "Go, Derek," she whispered. Derek looked around the room. He realized, finally, that he had no leverage left. He sneered one last time. "You'll regret this, all of you. I'll be back on top. And when I am, don't come crawling to me." He stormed out, slamming the front door so hard the windows rattled. I looked at the box on the table. The jumpsuit lay there, unworn. "Well," I said, closing the lid, "position's still open if he changes his mind." The fallout was swift and brutal. I turned the evidence over to the DA the next morning. Marcus's friend was very interested in the identity theft and the Ponzi scheme structure. Derek was indicted 2 weeks later on 14 counts of wire fraud, embezzlement, and identity theft. He didn't get bail. My parents' house was raided by the authorities looking for assets, but because I had proven the signature on the loan was forged, Dad was cleared of liability for that debt. They lost a lot of money. The investments they had given Derek willingly were gone forever, but they kept their home. It was a humbling experience for them. The Vance family image was shattered, but in the wreckage, we found something resembling honesty. Dad started coming by the shop on Tuesdays. At first, he just stood around awkwardly. Then, he started bringing coffee. Last week, I found him in the back, sweeping the bay floor. "Just wanted to make sure it was clean," he mumbled when I caught him. "You run a tight ship, Casey." It was the closest thing to an apology I was going to get, and it was enough. As for Redline, we're busier than ever. The negative reviews Derek bought were removed after I flagged them as spam, and the community rallied around us. My low-class garage is now expanding. We're adding 2 new bays next month. And the best part? I hired a new lube tech. A kid named Leo who dropped out of college because he loved cars. He reminds me of myself at that age. Yesterday, I was in the office when a letter arrived from the county jail. It was from Derek. I didn't open it, I just tossed it into the shredder. I don't have time for his stories anymore. I walked out into the bay, where the sound of impact wrenches and classic rock filled the air. Mike was under a lifted Chevy, welding a new exhaust bracket. My dad was organizing the tool chest. The sun was streaming through the open doors, lighting up the oil stains on the concrete like constellations. I took a deep breath. It smelled like grease, exhaust, and hard work. It smelled like success.